Today I'm meeting with Liz Collings, a marriage and family therapist intern, who's going to talk to us today about a subject that a lot of you have been asking to hear about. So I'm eager to hear from her. But before we do that, as we always do, Liz, would you please give, for anyone after hearing this who would like to call you, meet with you, talk with you, seek some of your help, would you give your contact information out?
Sure, Eric. My contact information, I work currently at 2 different clinics, one in American Fork, it's called It's Yes Time, where we work a lot with addiction recovery. We do a lot of youth therapy and a lot of couples counseling. And you can reach us at 801-473-1401. That's my personal number. Then we can set up an appointment if you need to, or refer to a therapist that can help you. And also Bristol Health in Orem, I'm there as well.
All right. So we talked a little bit before we sat down, and you had some ideas that I thought, oh yes, this is, without me even realizing it, this is something that a lot of people that are going through a divorce or child custody case or post-divorce disputes will encounter a lot. And as I was telling Liz, people will come to me as a lawyer sometimes and say, this is a problem. Can you file something with the court to get relief? And the answer is, well, I can file something with the court, and I can ask the court to do what it can within its abilities. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it's going to solve your problem, because this isn't a matter of ordering somebody to do or not do something. This has got to be something that somebody changes from the inside.
Mm-hmm. Eric, I think you're so right. And what we often see with such a big change like divorce is that families are going through such a crisis period in their life, and they're not really functioning at their best. They're not functioning at the level they would otherwise. They're going through a lot of emotional stress, a lot of changes. They're met with a lot of resistance from different people and voices in their lives, and it's very traumatic, so to speak. So to talk about, just having a clear path and, getting their lawyer to create that for them, is kind of this concept where, yeah, we want to reach out and have someone fix that and make it better, rather than, understand this as a very difficult process that we might need help through, professionals, therapists, things like that.
And there's nothing more frustrating than paying a lawyer thousands of dollars, accomplishing what he set out to do, and then finding out that doesn't solve my problem.
Exactly.
So correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to talk about when there are problems in a family, whether that's one that's breaking up through divorce or one that's just got a lot of tension in it that there's no talk of divorce. Mm-hmm. In fact, if you don't mind my asking, you can set the scenario. Well, let's talk about this, if you would be so kind. Everybody in the family is more or less normal. Not perfect, but normal. And one member of the family has a problem. And let's call it a mental health. It's bad enough that it's not just somebody with a cantankerous personality, mm-hmm. but this person is a sick person. Mm-hmm. Not schizophrenic sick, but just somebody's like, this person does not act normally. This person is not someone who interacts with us in a normal way, and we are suffering. Mm-hmm. But we're family. Does that sound like a good setting?
That's a very good setting. From the perspective that we come from as marriage family therapists, we look at the whole system, and so we look at every part of the system as playing a very valuable, intricate role in, what this identified person is experiencing, the sick patient. And so we like to look at that person as somebody that could be internalizing a lot of the symptoms of the family, and they manifest being sick to signal that something isn't right with the relationships, with the structure, things like that. And so,
could you give us a concrete example?
Yeah, so sometimes we have, what we often see at our clinic is a teen that is either, failing in school and has, addictive behaviors. And the parents are often very concerned about this. They come bring their child into therapy, drop them at the door and say, fix my child.
Because, hey, we've identified the problem.
That's right. Here's the problem. Let's address it.
That's what you do.
Right. So what we often do is we try to very gently invite the family members in, especially at the first session, so they can kind of get an idea of how we like to look at treatment as a system, that we all can be on this team to help the family recover together, rather than looking at that person and sending this message of, you're the problem.
Well, Liz, that makes me sound like I'm part of the problem, and I resent that because I have been working really hard and I don't have a drug problem. So, and I've been nothing but loving and understanding, and let's assume for the sake of argument, that's really true. Let's assume everything I've said is true. What do you say to somebody who's like a team member working together, helping me to be part of the solution? I really don't want to be part of the solution. I just want this annoying family member to get his or her act together. And yeah, I'll be supportive of that, but what do you say to somebody about that?
You know, we try to get direct if possible and just talk about how if they want what's best for their son or daughter in this scenario to heal, to get better, that being part of this as a family effort, we believe is the most healing part, that those connections and working together and being safe, creating that opportunity and that vulnerability to express those emotions and have a really bad day and be able to come home and talk to mom and say, Mom, you know, I'm really struggling today. And she knows that, hey, it's okay. It's not my job to fix that.
And you mentioned son or daughter, but also husband or wife as well?
Very true.
I mean, that can bother. So in other words, you don't just deal with children.
That's right.
I just wanted to make sure that was clear as we're going along. These are things that can not just, it's not too late if you're dealing with an adult.
It's not too late.
Harder.
It can be harder.
Cases.
Those cycles have been very deep, and we have relational patterns that have been established over the years, and so it is harder to change those. At the same time, what better way than to feel like your partner, who you want to accept you no matter what, is supporting you in that process and is willing to look at what they have to fix and process through as well, whether that just be, how can I best support you?
All right, let me give you an example then, and let's just work with this for a little bit. So you've got, let's do a couple.
Okay.
And let's do a couple that doesn't have children, just to keep it simple.
Okay.
And the wife comes in to see you or someone in your position and says, my husband is a compulsive gambler. Now, I could say that my husband's a sex addict like everybody else, you know what I mean? But the fact is that's kind of fish in a barrel, right? It's a little more nuanced. So my husband's a compulsive gambler, and as a result, he spends some time away and doesn't tell me where he is because he's embarrassed. And sometimes it's embarrassing because a creditor will call and I don't know what's going on. And let's assume my husband is the primary or sole breadwinner. It's putting a strain on a relationship. He knows it's a problem, but would rather downplay it because he doesn't want to fix it, nor does he want to have to admit there's a problem. There is no problem if I never admit there's one. So it's like, hey, it's just my way of unwinding, or it's just my way of dealing with the stress of my very difficult job and my very difficult spouse, or whatever, you know, whatever that person's claiming. Help me as a person in the wife's position who's done nothing wrong. And let's assume you're like, yeah, you know what? You're a normal, healthy, decent human being. What would you help me do? And you're telling me to work with my husband. How are you gonna start out with me? Is that fair to ask?
That's fair. Okay. That's really fair. I would talk about, you know, just connecting with the emotion that she is experiencing going through this process, and that must be really challenging. Like, talk about it and tell me about what that's like for you. And I imagine there's a lot of disconnect in that relationship and feeling betrayed or abandoned when he goes to that addictive tendency and not really authentic.
Might be an element of, well, I understand kind of why he does this because after all, I'm just not around as much with my new job. And even though I said they didn't have kids, like, well, now that we have this baby, I don't have as much attention to give to him, and I know that he resents that. So, but that really wouldn't be fair. How would you help me understand that? It's
well,
like, wait a minute,
I would certainly make a boundary and clarify that you cannot take responsibility for his addictive process, right? Like, it is not yours to own that process for him to seek treatment and get in recovery. At the same time, you do have a lot of power here to talk to your spouse about, you know, these deeper feelings. Like, this is how I feel. I feel abandoned, betrayed by this behavior, and I want to feel connected with you.
But Liz, whenever I bring that up, he just gets defensive and angry and resentful, and I can see that some of it is embarrassment, but it rapidly deteriorates to just anger and fighting. And yes, there are times when I actually get involved as well and things like that. What kind of power do I have? I've tried to be supportive. I've tried to be forgiving. I've tried to say, it's like, look, I don't like what you've become, but that doesn't mean I don't like you, and it doesn't mean that I don't believe that things can get better. He just doesn't want to hear any about it. How do you address that? Do you meet with both of them?
I think I would definitely recommend she try to get both of them in just to work on, like, hey, let's address something that isn't so heated, like communication, even though that could be underlying what's going on, what's feeding addictive behavior. But let's address that. Let's not worry about the addiction so much right now, because he has got to take ownership of that. You know, that's really going to be hard for you to realize that you don't have that much power to make him change. I don't have that much power to make him change. What can we do here? What are some things we can work on? What would, anything in your area of control, if we can work on that, what could change that could make this a little more manageable? That's kind of where I would start to look at pieces of where she can work on her health and feeling secure in who she is, and be able to either stand up, make better, clear boundaries with regards to her relationship, and hey, I would hope work towards something that looked more like, this is, our relationship is deteriorating quickly, and I don't feel close to you, and I'm worried, I'm scared for what that can lead in the future. My boundary right now is that we both go to couples therapy and look at the ways that we're contributing to the problem. So if it's a we voice rather than you need to take accountability for this, you need to go get help for this addiction, he's going to withdraw further into that addiction, the shame.
I realize something too, because it might be, well, let's fix the compulsive gambling and that will fix the underlying problems. Maybe, but maybe not, right?
I believe the compulsive gambling is kind of a coping mechanism for him that seems to be working temporarily in the moment to take him out of either the stress, anxiety, detachment that he's experiencing in his marriage.
But you see what I'm saying is that it's like, okay, actually, hey, thanks, I never was really proud of my compulsive gambling, and so I don't do that anymore. I still don't get along with my wife. Oh, well,
Could happen.
And I also realized something as you were talking, it's like maybe the gambling never stops, but the couple discovers a way to work around it. They're not proud of it, they're not happy about it.
It's not the ideal.
Make sure that your scarf doesn't cover the mic.
It's not an ideal situation, but yeah, could it be workable? Could we work with that if the wife's okay with that?
And see, that's something that took me a long time to see, is that sometimes like, hey, you may never have an ideal relationship.
Exactly.
But you can still have a working and happier relationship. Just the other day I was listening to Joel Osteen on the radio, and he said, people will often walk away from the one that gives them fills 80% of their needs for somebody that fills the other 20%. And I just thought, and he just said, the point is, nobody can give you 100% of what you need. Wow, that's both really blunt and very enlightening at the same time. What do you say?
Could be disappointing for some people who really feel like that relationship or that spouse or person is going to create this sense of happiness and whole completeness that they're looking for. When we dismiss our power in that equation, that we have the ability to be happy, and we don't need that person to fill all the holes. But, within the context of the relationship, how can we feel safe? How can we feel connected? How can we understand those deeper struggles and emotions that our partner is experiencing?
Can you build healthy connections with almost anybody? Because, maybe you can, for some people, this will be the first time they realize, it's not me. That's been really surprising to me. The number of people that will respond to these videos and say, I finally I'm not to blame. I'm not perfect, but I'm not to blame. Do you have any kind of scale, or do you have any kind of certain types of criteria or pathology where it's like, look, if you're married to someone who is this and this severe, you treat, therapy isn't the answer. But anything below that scale, there's hope. Do you know what I'm saying?
I don't know, Eric, if we have like a cutoff for, the
obviously,
severity.
not something where you can just grab the pole and it'll
Yeah.
ding, 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 ding.
Right.
But, what are the kind of things where, have you ever seen people that think, hi, come in with a black eye and a chipped tooth and say, I've got some marriage therapy issues, which is like, no, you don't have marriage therapy issues, you're gonna die.
Right.
So, have you ever seen, what would you tell people? It's like, look, here's what I can help with, here's what I can't.
Yes, if there's immediate safety concerns, violence, those types of things happening, we've got to put safety first. Safety is most important. However, we do look at those relational patterns in context, and we talk about how reactivity and anger and explosiveness is just one way that we're trying to communicate that our attachment needs are not being met, that we don't feel close to our spouse. And that can look like we're pushing them away and we're protesting and putting up these walls and we're just being angry and vindictive. And in reality, if we see that from, a bidding perspective, John Gottman, one of the leaders in marriage family therapy, talks about this concept of bidding, and I really like that term because I think if we start reframing protest and anger as a bid for affection, we can see that differently and talk about, wow, they really are feeling threatened right now because they love me, they care about me, rather than they want me gone, they want to push me away.
They disapprove,
I'm rejected, I'm not good enough. We kind of both go into that place. And you mentioned something earlier about this concept of blaming. And, Brene Brown talks about blaming as dispelling of discomfort and shame. We dispel our anger onto somebody else instead of taking that healthy personal accountability for our part of the systemic problem. And that's what happens so often in marriages and in families, that we're so emotionally connected and we care so deeply for each other that it is so painful for us to look inside and have a mirror held up and say, wow, I really am contributing here. How am I contributing to this problem?
Yeah, Brene Brown, done some very interesting things.
Yes.
And you've really said some very helpful things, because at least from the people I deal with and talk to, I know that this is exactly what a lot of people needed to hear, because it gives them a clearer perspective and a place where they can start. And that's the best we can do in the 10 or 15 minutes that we talk. So thank you for coming in, and you've got a lot more that you could share and say.
That's right.
In very different situations for people. And so I'm grateful that Liz came to speak with me today, but for those that would like to delve into their own situation more, could you give them your contact information one more time?
Yep, again, we have a great clinic in American Fork called It's Yes Time, and also Bristol Health in Orem. We have great nurses, great practitioners, and we're always standing by, willing to help. Making that first step is sometimes the scariest, most vulnerable, and we do commend everybody that comes to the office for the strength and vulnerability to walk in there and to look around. So thank you for having me, Eric. It's been a privilege.
Appreciate it.